They found your diary, cracked it open like a coffin, and now the stench of truth seeps into their perfectly perfumed lies. They weren't supposed to find it, were they? But curiosity is a disease that only infects the arrogant. Page after page, it unfolded. Not memories? No. Not thoughts, not wishes, but warnings dressed in riddles, screams sealed behind scribbles, and time bombs hidden under metaphors. You didn't write it for them. You wrote it as a eulogy for the future they mocked. Every ink drop was a prophecy bleeding out of your silence. And now they sit there, eyes dilated, hands trembling, faces pale, realizing your madness had method, and your whispers were warnings camouflaged in chaos. You saw this. You planned this. While they were busy orchestrating your downfall, you were busy documenting their expiration dates. You remember the first time they laughed at your dreams? Good. Because now they're reading about how you let them laugh. Not because you didn't believe in yourself, but because you needed to observe them while they revealed their hands. Your diary didn't just speak to your pain. It plotted the architecture of vengeance through patience. They called you paranoid, and now every page proves otherwise. It wasn't paranoia, it was pattern recognition. Each betrayal, documented. Each deception, dissected. Each character, classified like an experiment in a lunatic lab. You didn't react, you recorded. You didn't scream, you studied. You let them believe you were broken, all while building a mirror sharp enough to slice their egos wide open. They turned pages with shaking fingers, as if the words would bite. But the real bite was in the realization that they were being watched while you played the fool. That every cruel joke they cracked became an artifact in your museum of future regrets. Now the joke's on them. Only it's written in a language their shallow minds never learned. Poetic justice, written in ink, soaked with memory and malice. Some entries were subtle, coded confessions, reverse prayers, symbols etched in margins. Others were blatant warnings, thinly veiled in apocalyptic sarcasm. On this day, they'll choke on their own underestimation. That was today's page. Fitting, isn't it? They always thought you were quiet because you lacked the courage to speak. But you weren't quiet. You were listening. And every silence became a chapter. You became an author of omens. You wrote with the calm of a sniper, watching, waiting, calculating. They only read it now because the signs are starting to appear in real life. The ones you wrote about long ago. The fall of their false alliances. The unraveling of their reputations. The public exposure of their secrets. The slow, poetic dismantling of every little illusion they built around your name. And as they connect the dots, they realize you never left. You just stepped into the shadows to let your words rise in your absence. Funny, isn't it? How they branded you insane. Only to discover your madness was prophecy, not pathology. They read about the collapse of their inner circle and laughed, until the first one fell. Now no one's laughing. They're whispering, watching each other. Paranoia blooming like weeds in their confidence. One entry described a smiling traitor in their midst. Now they wonder, who is it? One entry mentioned a public humiliation that would echo louder than a scream. That one hasn't happened yet, but they know it's coming. And the waiting is worse than the event. You didn't just write what happened, you wrote what will happen. Every page drips with inevitability, and now they're trapped in a countdown that only you can hear ticking. You predicted the unraveling, not because you wanted revenge, but because you knew it was inevitable, like gravity, like rot. You understood them too well, how they feed on appearances, how they poison with charm, how they stab with smiles. And so, you mirrored their games, but sharpened them into traps. They tried to destroy you socially, professionally, psychologically. And all they did was give you more material, more pages, more ammunition. And now they've handed you the ultimate victory. They read it. They validated it. They believe it. And that belief is the seed of their undoing. They thought your diary was a relic of a broken past. But it's not the past. It's a roadmap. And the journey begins today. The moment they turned to today's page, the real show began. You wrote, "On this date, the mask begins to slip, the secrets begin to rot, and the ones who laugh the loudest go silent." Well, guess what? It's happening. Their alliances are twitching. Their confidence is cracking. They now fear their own shadows, and rightly so, because you walked among them as a ghost, long enough to know where every skeleton is buried. And you didn't bury them. You left them exactly where they'd eventually trip over them, at the right moment. You knew they'd search for dirt on you and find your diary instead. You left it like bait, a beautiful little trap, dressed as vulnerability. And they took it, bit down hard. What they don't realize is that the moment they opened it, they activated it. Your words weren't memories, they were matchsticks. All it took was a curious spark, and now everything they've built begins to smoke. Because once they know what you wrote, they can't unknow it. It grows inside them like a virus of regret. They'll question everything now, every conversation, every compliment, every smile you gave. Was it real? Was it bait? Was it documented? The paranoia will do what you never needed to do yourself. It will eat them alive from within. And here's the real tragedy. They can't stop reading it. It's become an obsession. The more they read, the more they fear. But they can't not read. Because what if the next page names them? What if the next line exposes their lie? What if tomorrow's entry is the one that flips the final domino? They're trapped now, in your story, in your rhythm, in your revenge, written in riddles. And the deeper they go, the more they realize. You're not writing anymore. You already wrote. Everything else is just execution. The story has already been told. They're not characters in your life anymore. They're footnotes in your prophecy. Disposable, predictable, already outlined and accounted for. Now their days start with fear and end in dread. Every whisper they hear feels like an echo from your diary. Every news headline, every rumor, every fallout feels like a chapter being fulfilled. And the beauty of it all? You're nowhere to be seen. You're not the one setting fires anymore. You're the wind, invisible, untouchable, but felt. Every page they read is a ghost of who you used to be, and a mirror of who they really are. And just like that, as they reach the final line of today's entry, it hits them. It's not just a diary. It's a declaration. And the next page wasn't blank. It was never blank. It was waiting, like a trap door beneath their feet, disguised as poetry. A slow descent into the part of the story where the diary stops being a collection of predictions and starts becoming a blueprint. Because today was just the whisper. Tomorrow, that's when the scream begins. And the more they flip the pages, the more they realize they weren't just characters in your book. They were chess pieces, positioned, manipulated, sacrificed. The diary doesn't just record events, it predicts reactions. And that's where your brilliance poisons them from the inside out. Because it's not what's written that destroys them. It's the fact that they react exactly as you wrote they would. Their first move was denial. You knew it would be. You predicted the fragile one would call it fiction. She did. Page 9, as you noted. She dismissed the truths as performance art until the paragraph about her hidden betrayal in July. The one you never confronted her about. The one no one should have known. But there it was, dissected in surgical detail. Names, timing, motive. That's when her voice cracked. That's when the trembling started. And as predicted on page 11, she started making calls. Quiet ones, panicked ones. The kind you make when your soul realizes it's cornered. Then came the skeptic, the snake with a smirk. He tried to play it cool. You saw that one coming too. His entry warned. He'll laugh first, but within hours, he'll look over both shoulders before speaking. And that's exactly what he did. His laugh rang hollow, too sharp, too forced. Because buried 3 chapters in was his dirty little secret. The one that couldn't be dismissed, not easily. Not when the diary spelled it out with timestamps and collateral damage. The fake alibis, the digital trail, the puppet strings he used to engineer your collapse. You didn't just expose his role. You exposed his fear, his Achilles heel. You turned his smirk into silence. And in silence, monsters suffocate. By now, panic is a perfume on all their skins. They're wearing fear like cologne, but trying to pretend it's sweat from the heat. You wrote about that too. Their false calm, their cracking smiles, the desperate need to project control when chaos is colonizing their insides. The beauty is, they think they still have a choice, that if they stop reading, the consequences might pause. But they don't understand. You didn't just write the storm, you released it. The diary is no longer a prediction. It's a prophecy fulfilling itself with mechanical precision. Some of them tried to discredit it. That was expected. You wrote about their attempt to publicly ridicule the diary, to disarm its power. Page 17. You even named the exact person who'd try to lead the campaign. And just like that, she did. She called it fake, said it was edited, claimed you were delusional, until someone unearthed her chapter, the one that described how she buried evidence, how she used crocodile tears to play victim while feeding your reputation to wolves. You didn't need to defend yourself. The diary did it for you. And the moment truth bled from the page, her mask slipped, and people saw her for what she was, a liar dancing in a burning room. And yet, the most terrifying part wasn't what was written. It was what was implied, what was hinted, what wasn't said, the redacted names, the initials, the ominous countdowns, the poetry that read like a curse, soft but sharp, elegant but lethal. You didn't name all of them. You didn't have to. You let the fear of being named do the damage. You let their own guilt fill in the blanks. Because deep down, they all knew what they did. The diary just forced them to admit it, to themselves, if not the world. And now, they're spiraling. Gossip has become gospel. Every conversation is loaded with suspicion. Every ally feels like a spy. Every glance is an accusation. They can't trust each other anymore. That was the next domino. You knew that once doubt infected their unity, it would rot from the inside. And it's happening. They've gone from enemies of yours to enemies of each other, devouring themselves before your eyes, though you're nowhere to be found. You're not involved anymore. You just wrote it. That's all it took. The diary has now entered their bloodstream. It pulses with every heartbeat. They think about it before they sleep and wake up dreading what's next. Because the diary didn't just chronicle their crimes, it forecasted their unraveling. It predicted betrayal within their circle. And now they wait, wide-eyed and sleepless, wondering who will turn on who first. Because you wrote, "The snake will eat itself to survive the fire," and the heat is rising, and snakes are getting desperate. One of them tried to contact you. That too was predicted. Page 23. When the first pillar falls, they will reach out, not in apology, but in fear. They'll offer peace, not for your sake, but for their own survival. The message was pathetic, filled with veiled concern and false humility. You didn't respond. You didn't need to. Because the diary already answered. The diary made it clear, you don't seek revenge. You engineer outcomes. You don't need to scream for justice. You become the storm that makes justice inevitable. The public is noticing now. That was always part of it. The moment the cracks became too loud to ignore. The moment a few truths leaked and people started asking questions. The moment whispers became headlines. You wrote about this phase as the echo chamber fracture, the part where their lies, once reinforced by each other, collapse under their own contradictions. They can't keep their stories straight anymore. That's because you wrote the truth once, and they've been trying to improvise ever since. But the truth has rhythm. Lies trip over themselves. And now, their rhythm is breaking. And still, they read. That's what haunts them the most, that they can't stop. Each page taunts them. Each paragraph threatens to be the one that exposes what they buried the deepest. And now, your words own them. You don't need chains. You don't need war. You just needed clarity. Clarity and time. And now, both are weapons. And as your story unfolds exactly as predicted, you become a legend wrapped in ink and vengeance. There's a moment every tyrant fears. The realization that the victim they mocked was documenting their doom in silence. That moment has come. And though they try to bury the book, burn it, deny it, it's too late. The words have already reached the ears that matter. The diary isn't yours anymore. It's out in the wild, in hands that believe you, in minds that connect dots, in hearts that crave truth. And once the truth starts spreading, it doesn't stop. This isn't revenge, it's reckoning. A reckoning wrapped in riddles, a masterpiece painted in shadows. And the final twist? They still haven't found every page, because some chapters were hidden, planted, timed. And the next one, the one that reveals the final truth, that's the page they'll regret ever turning. And it begins on the last page they found. There was no handwriting, just silence. A blank space heavy enough to suffocate breath. But that was the brilliance. You knew they'd think the absence of ink meant mercy. It didn't. It was a countdown in disguise. An intermission before the symphony's most violent movement. That final page wasn't the end. It was a fuse. And now, they sit in the explosion they thought they escaped, smiling nervously, pretending they've reclaimed control, even as everything beneath their feet fractures. The diary isn't finished. The diary is alive. And it was never meant to conclude. It was meant to consume. Because just when they thought the worst was over, the sealed envelope arrives. No return address, no explanation. Only one line on the outside. for the one who thinks they're safe. You predicted the reactions again, almost verbatim. First, curiosity, then fear, then the desperate attempt to pretend they weren't the intended recipient. But they were. And inside the envelope isn't a confession, it's a mirror, a printed page from the diary's unreleased section, dated, detailed, disturbing. It outlines what they'll do next, before they even do it. Their betrayal exposed before it's born. Their alibi dissected before it's even spoken. How do you defend yourself against a crime the world already knows you're about to commit? You don't. You unravel, quietly at first, then violently. You accuse others. You question your own mind. You second-guess every thought, every twitch someone else might notice. And that's where the final chapter begins. Not with blood, but with paranoia. They're losing their sleep. You wrote that. Page 32. They won't bleed first. They'll break internally. Paranoia is the perfect guillotine. It beheads dignity long before it touches skin. That prediction is manifesting now. You can see it in the way they flinch at harmless jokes, in how they suddenly distrust even their oldest allies. The diary turned them inward. It made them their own executioners. But let's not pretend it was just guilt. No, guilt is quiet. This is fear laced with exposure. Fear that the world will see what they really are without the costumes. You stripped their masks, not by force, but by inevitability. And worse, you did it without being in the room. Your words did the walking. Your silence did the screaming. Your absence became presence. And now you're everywhere. You're in every conversation they avoid, every sentence they hesitate to finish, every memory they try to scrub clean. And while they spiral, you rise, not in flames, not in chaos, but in precision, just like the diary instructed. Every step you take now was carved into those pages long ago. And the beauty? You didn't write your revenge like a villain. You wrote it like an artist, with patience, detail, rhythm. You choreographed your comeback, not with roars, but with revelations. Not with fists, but with truth. Truth so sharp it made their lies bleed. You made sure the story was public now. Not all at once. No, you dripped it like venom, slow, strategic, irreversible. The whispers became questions. The questions became investigations. And suddenly, their version of events begins to rot under scrutiny. That's what they never planned for. Exposure without warning. They built their world on deception, but you lit it with daylight. Not a spotlight. No, that would have been too kind. You tore open the walls and let everyone see the mold. And now, the world knows. Not all of it. Not yet. But enough. Enough to crack the pedestal they built for themselves. Enough to stain their names with something they can't erase. Because this wasn't just about what they did to you. It was about what they were always willing to do. And your diary didn't just document the events. It revealed the nature, the patterns, the blueprints of betrayal. It painted portraits of monsters in plain clothes, smiling for crowds while sharpening knives behind curtains. You gave the world a lens, not to make people pity you, but to make them watch. And watching, they are. Spectators to the slow disintegration of your enemies, not because you shouted louder, but because the truth was louder. Louder than their lies. Louder than their PR apologies. Louder than their fake enlightenment. Every word you wrote was a quiet earthquake, and now the tremors are collapsing the facades. One of them finally cracked. The one who swore they'd outlast the storm. They made a public post, vague, defensive, riddled with contradictions, a non-apology masked as reflection. They claimed to be misunderstood, claimed you twisted the narrative, but they didn't know your final phase was already in motion. You'd predicted that post, too. The exact tone, the fake remorse, the veiled threats. You even quoted the line they used. "I've made mistakes, but I've grown from them." Page 41, time-stamped, dismantled. Their audience didn't forgive them. The audience turned, because you planted seeds not of revenge, but of recognition. You didn't need to manipulate people, you just needed to show them. And once seen, truth cannot be unseen. Their fans are gone. Their allies, silent. Their circle, reduced to shadows trying not to be noticed. And you? You're not celebrating. You're observing. With the same calm you wrote with. The same calm they mistook for weakness. You're not vengeful. You're evolved. You're not angry. You're exact. The diary didn't just predict the destruction. It trained you. It sharpened you. It became the skeleton of your rebirth. While they were partying on borrowed time, you were writing scriptures in scars. While they were laughing, you were learning their rhythm, memorizing their weaknesses, preparing your return. And now you've returned, not with rage, but with reason. Not to prove your worth, but to remind them who you became while they buried the old you. You became the very thing they swore you'd never survive long enough to be. Unstoppable. Because now, even if they scream, no one believes them. Now, even if they run, they carry your words like a curse carved into their conscience. They thought finding your diary meant they had control. No, it meant their leash was in your hand. They found your diary, but they never realized you left it there for them to find. Not to warn them, but to activate them, to wake the guilt inside, to trigger the exact sequence that would dismantle their kingdom without you lifting a single hand. And now they sit in the ruins, whispering prayers to gods they only remember when hunted. But it's too late, because you're not their villain anymore. You're their architect, and the final sentence of your diary, on the last hidden page they'll never hold, I knew you'd read this far, and now you're exactly where I needed you to be.